Chapter 11 Negotiation. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Apophis finally arrived in front of the Omiya hospital where he'd left the Zetark girl the day before. However, two members of the military police seemed to be checking the identity cards of everyone entering, and of course as a player, he was without identity papers. Apophis used his interface to inspect them. Military Police of the Republic of Tayo, Level 1, Rank F, Hostility. Passive. He approached the two policemen and spoke firmly. I am an Eternal, my daughter is in the hospital, I need to pass. They moved to draw their weapons. Apophis. Don't do anything stupid. But one of the policemen fired. And slightly injured the left shoulder of Apophis, who retaliated by sending his fist in the jaw of the first policeman, making him collapse on the ground. Then sent a cross punch into the neck of the second one, breaking his neck and killing him instantly. His strength and agility was already not very human. At level 4 he had 40% more strength and speed than any human, and at each level this number increased, widening the gap between Eternal and Tayading. A notification popped up. NPC, Military Police of the Republic of Tayo, killed. Gain 138 EXP and 3 GC.100 reputation with the Republic of Tayo. He finished off the first policeman and received a similar notification. People were screaming and running all around Apophis, horrified at his murder of two policemen. However, he knew that the entire police force was very busy in a different part of the city and wouldn't send anyone to stop him. Apophis had just killed two NPCs with levels of consciousness very close to those of humans, but he couldn't be bothered to consider the morality of his actions at the moment. Once he was powerful, he could take on the role of a protective god and save billions of lives, but for now, he had to focus on his level progression. After his negotiation with the policeman, he entered the hospital and found the room where he'd left the Zetark. She was still in a coma. Her doctor had performed an initial medical examination, but was waiting for written permission to perform further examinations. However, upon realizing Apophis had just murdered two policemen and that no one would stop him, the doctor went ahead with the tests immediately. Apophis settled down in a chair while he waited. Though he disliked reading, it was crucial to deepen his understanding of the Zetark race. So he took out the books he'd looted from the Zetark laboratory and read them. Thanks to his archaeologist passive skill, he could rapidly learn the Zetark language by doing so. After a few hours of reading, Apophis discovered that one book described the location of a Zetark military bunker on the continent of Aurora. But just as he began to learn some of the most important details, a terrified-looking nurse interrupted him, clearly afraid that Apophis would murder her. She said that the examinations could explain nothing about the Zetark girl's condition. She might wake up tomorrow, or never again. What was the best thing to do? It wouldn't make any sense to keep paying to keep an unconscious NPC alive. But just as Apophis was resigning himself to abandoning the girl, a notification appeared. Quest notification. Save the Princess, secret quest, grade 1020. Difficulty S+, summary. The Zetark you saved is dying because her life energy is dwindling. You must quickly infuse her with your life energy to save her. Objective. Reach LVL 10. Inject 1,500 of your energy into the Zetark you rescued. Time limit. 3 days reward. Achieve, friendly, relationship with Princess Antanria, plus gain 1 legendary skill of your choice for your class. Failure penalty. Death of Princess Antanria, lose your Savior of the Zetark title, and achieve, hostile, relationship with the Zetark species. A Zetark princess. It was true that, before its collapse, the Zetark Empire was an absolute monarchy governed by divine right. Of course, after their restoration in Apophis's first life, the Zetark had united in clans or had subordinated themselves to player guilds. Was this girl a lost member of the Zetark imperial family? Apophis hesitated for a long time. The quest's potential rewards were impressive, but the losses would cripple him once the Zetark came back to life en masse. He summoned his courage and clicked accept. Then, after packing up his books, Apophis bought a few items and then set off towards the Zetark military bunker. Chapter 12 Evolution. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Apophis drove his motorcycle for 3 hours until he reached the continent, Dawn. It was a long journey that took him across a desert full of LVL4 creatures. At LVL4, most monsters were resistant to common firearms, so he'd need to deal final blows in hand-to-hand combat. He'd prepared well, having bought a complete set of common armor and equipping one of the 2 service weapons he'd looted from the police officers in front of the hospital. This seemed like a good place to grind until LVL5. According to his calculations, it would take Apophis 6 hours of intensive farming to reach his goal. So he got to work attacking the first creature he saw. Gobi Desert Coyote, level 4, rank F, hostility. Hostile, a billion miles away. Admiral Azeroth of the Federation of United Planets. Read the planetary sent by Era. According to his experts on staff, the manifestation of these Eternals was a phenomenon of cosmic origin. Due to the potential scale of the threat, Admiral Azeroth needed to go and immediately take control of the situation. To fulfill this mission, the Admiral had requisitioned a cruiser and 3 corvettes, as well as several hundred troop transports. According to his chief logistics officer, the trip would take 1 week at sublight speed. Apophis, Gobi Desert. It had been 5 hours since Apophis began fighting coyotes and other creatures in the Gobi Desert, and he was finally at 99% of his EXP bar. Finally, he finished off one last creature and heard the sound he was waiting for. Level 5 achieved finally. Now it was time for him to evolve. Standing atop a hill, far away from the interference of any monsters, Apophis clicked on the character menu and selected the race submenu. Please select from the available evolutionary paths. Evolved Human, Tier 1. Humanity has ascended, gaining the ability to use its internal cosmic energy. Due to not having completed any quests or obtained any items to provide other options, this was the only choice. Apophis selected it and felt a strong energy heat his blood. The evolution process took about 10 minutes and was surprisingly pleasant. Afterward, he inspected the character menu. Name: Apophis, Guild. /race. Evolved Human, Evolution LVL. 1. Gender: male class. Please select a class. LVL 5 rank. E. Alignment 0, neutral. Stats: STR, Strength 150 INT, Intelligence 150 AGI, Agility 150 DX, Dexterity 150 Energy 100 Luck 1. Global Skill Skill / Learning Tree / Passive Skill Archaeologist. Inventory Equipment: civilian clothing, common, service pistol, common, common armor, common, money. 1023 Galactic Coin Server. You have evolved, human. But even if you are a predator on your home planet, you are still prey to the creatures of the universe, as your awakening will soon reveal. It was time to choose his class. Chapter 13 Class. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Apophis opened the class menu and looked at his choices. Though he was pretty certain of which class he would choose, he gave the list a read anyway. Perhaps it would be fun to play another class this time around. Warrior. Specializes in the use of melee weapons. Broad equipment choices allow for high versatility and survivability. Main stats: agility, strength. Boxer. Fights using martial arts and other unarmed skills. Huge crowd control potential, as well as the ability to bypass many common defenses against swords and guns. Main stats: strength. Sniper. Only uses ranged weapons. Can unleash devastating attacks when given enough preparation time, but this can be difficult without the support of allies. Main stats. Dexterity Esper. Draws upon psychic powers to control the elements and manipulate the laws of physics. A very difficult class, but with enormous late-game potential. Main stats. Intelligence Energy. Engineer. Uses mechanical knowledge to craft robotic pets, armor, and other gadgets. Can create a huge advantage before a fight begins, but can't easily recover if inventions are destroyed during a long fight. Main stats. Intelligence Energy. Hunter. Summons powerful war beasts and wields a variety of ranged weapons. Learns a variety of supplemental skills to help it survive in the wilderness. Main stats. Dexterity. After giving the list some careful thought, Apophis realized that it would be best to choose his old life's class, after all. He was deeply familiar with it, and also had a few powerful skill books to support it. He clicked on Esper System. Congratulations on choosing the Esper class. With that, the leveling up process was complete. System. Next available race evolution. LVL 10. Now Apophis had 5 skill points which he could spend on the Esper talent tree. Later, if he had many more skill points, he could also use them to upgrade skills he learned from Esper skill books. The ability lists on each class's talent tree was huge, especially for Espers, and his list would grow larger as Apophis's intelligence stat grew. He could eventually specialize in DPS, healing, or support abilities. However, the most useful abilities for the early game were available right away, and Apophis would likely spend most of his skill points in the first few branches of the talent tree, unless he found special items later which could exploit the benefits of more situational skills. In Apophis's original life, the complexity of the Esper's talent tree made it one of the least played classes, but Apophis had come to understand it very well over his 9 years in the game. All that experience led him to his first decision. Putting all 5 skill points into firebending from the pyrokinesis branch of the Esper talent tree. This skill would allow Apophis to use flames to attack his enemies, which would be considerably more effective than either shooting them with weak guns or punching them. But at the moment, firebending was fairly weak. In the future, he could improve the skill as much as he wanted, since there was no cap on the number of skill points one could put into a single skill. If he felt like it, Apophis could put 100 skill points into firebending and wield the power of the sun in the palm of his hand. In addition, gaining other skills from the Esper talent tree would unlock synergies between them, increasing his overall power. The system was extremely flexible, and the combinations a player could create were almost endless. Once he'd learned firebending, Apophis immediately read the skill book for Chaos Flame, the book he'd looted from the Zetark lab. Not only did Chaos Flame grant a 100% bonus to all fire damage he dealt, but it gave his skills a unique appearance, as well. Crimson-pink flames burst from the palm of his hand and into the sky of the Gobi Desert. The light illuminated a pack of coyotes, casting dark shadows from their bodies as they turned towards Apophis's location on top of the hill. Perhaps drawn by the light, they took off towards Apophis at a run. Before he'd leveled up, this number of coyotes would have meant certain death. But things were different now. Apophis hurled a long wave of crimson flames at the closest coyote. The poor creature screamed in pain before collapsing. System. Gobi Desert Coyote, killed. Gain 143 EXP. Wow, double damage was really nothing to laugh at. Apophis was elated. Thanks to completing that quest in the temple, he was far more powerful than a normal LVL 5 player would be. The rest of the coyotes scattered in terror at the contemptuous way Apophis had killed their leader, and Apophis laughed as they fled. Then he picked up his motorcycle and continued on his way to the Zetark military bunker, whose location he'd learned from the books in the lab. Capital of the Republic of Tayo. The situation with the invading Eternals was becoming untenable for the Republican government. Refugees were pouring in from all over the planet to the capital, and there was simply not enough space for everyone, nor enough resources. The president was quickly running out of ways to deal with the situation. Currently, Eternals were estimated to have killed 30.5 million people, but there was also a famine arising from disruption of global supply chains. Several dozen cities had already fallen to the Eternals as the army of the Republic of Taio failed to maintain order. But the president had received some good news from the Federation of United Planets. They were sending him an army. The 6 days it would take them to arrive worried him, but the president knew that there was still plenty of time before the Republic of Taio irreversibly collapsed. Once this horrible situation was over, perhaps then the president could get some sleep. Chapter 14 Fireblood. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Outskirts of Monstanopolis. Apophis had now been riding his motorcycle for several hours. He was approaching the Azov Strait, which served as a link between the continents of Teresa and Aurora. Specifically, he was approaching Monstanopolis, a huge city with territory on both sides of the strait. However, when he arrived at the entrance of the city, he saw a line of players and NPCs waiting to enter. He sped to the front of the line on his motorcycle, burning a handful of angry protests from those in line, but was eventually stopped by a dozen LVL-3 players at the gate, all armed with low-level machine guns. "Hello, friends," the chief sentry was saying. "Welcome to Outpost 58 of Monstanopolis. This city is currently under the control of our guild, the Avengers. Please pay the toll of 250 GC and have a safe stay in our city." During the downfall of the Republic of Taio, many player-run guilds in Apophis's first life had quickly filled the power vacuums appearing across the nation. In some places, the guilds only forced NPCs to pay protection money. Most, though, were extraordinarily greedy and charged more and more fees all the time. This, of course, included tolls for entry into cities. After all, why bother to spend time grinding low-level quests for galactic coins? It was far more lucrative to racketeer players with no means of resistance. It might not result in any EXP, but every galactic coin had the potential to be turned into the real-world global currency of credits, and that was quite appealing to the guilds who only existed for the sake of profit. When he heard this demand for an entry fee, Apophis smirked. "I'd rather shove a stick up my ass than give you a single coin." The head sentry glared at him. Though Apophis's level was visible, nobody else had come anywhere close to LVL5 yet. This sentry would have no idea of the power gap between them. "Oh," the guild member said, "a fool who thinks his higher level means he doesn't have to play by the rules. Look, you sniveling bastard, either you give me 1000 GC or we'll slaughter you on the spot. You'll lose your money and your level." The other players in line shuffled around in interest, happy that someone had the balls to stand up to this brute. Someone even pulled up the in-game view capture menu and started recording. Apophis stared at the head sentry for a long moment. Then he grabbed him by the face and burned him alive. The sentry screamed at the top of his lungs. Though Horus's simulated pain was nothing close to what the player would have experienced in the real world, it was still quite horrible. The other 11 sentries, startled and scared, began shooting their pathetically weak weapons, none of which did much to their target. Apophis retaliated with a swirling, 180-degree fire screen that burned 8 players at once, then dispatched the last 3 with fire-infused punches. The players waiting in line were impressed. "Is this what class abilities look like?" they asked each other. "He's so powerful." But more importantly, everyone was baffled as to the identity of this player who'd already reached LVL5. The majority of players, after all, were still either LVL1 or LVL2. Only the top players had managed to grind so effectively that they'd reached LVL3. The in-game video capture of the fight was quickly posted on the Horus forums, triggering massive hype about this mysterious player known as Apophis. Many people hypothesized that he was a professional MMORPG player backed by one of the new super guilds. Of course, it wasn't long before people made the connection to the first time Apophis had been mentioned on the forums. As Apophis walked through Monstanopolis, he received hundreds of private messages from other players. Hey big brother. Crazy fight. Wow. Hey, you want to join my guild? Do you have a special technique for grinding? Apophis ignored all the incoming messages, focused solely on his goal. He was only an hour away from the Zetark bunker, which none of the other players had even the slightest idea existed. All the hype and discussion was like background noise to him. Chapter 15 Spider Burned. You are listening at Novel Full. Audio. Once he came close to his destination, the road veered away and would take Apophis no further. He abandoned his motorcycle, then spent the next hour hiking towards his destination. Finally, he arrived at the coordinates, a grouping of extremely uneven hills which looked suspiciously unnatural. Yet, he saw no bunker, nor a building of any kind. However, Apophis was certain that the Zetark books were accurate, and he carefully investigated the area. After several minutes of searching, he found a huge entrance into the ground, which was hidden under a rocky ledge on one of the hills. To a casual observer, this opening would have been completely invisible. Exactly the sort of entrance Apophis expected for a secret military bunker. He entered, observing the gradual downward slope of gravel and stone under his feet. With this in mind, Apophis walked along the path for 2 hours, using a plume of chaos flame in his hand as a torch. Finally, he emerged into a wide chamber which led to the shore of an underground lake that shimmered with luminescence. But there, next to the lake, were several red-spotted spiders 50 centimeters high. Proto-spiders. Apophis gasped. He remembered them from his first life. They were powerful creatures, quite deadly to low-level players. They usually served as mini-boss encounters to guard moderately important locations underneath the surface of planet Era. He inspected these particular spiders. Elite monster, name. Era's proto-spider, LVL. 13, rank. E+, but in the middle of the rest was a proto-spider twice as big as the others. Boss monster, name. Proto-spider queen, LVL. 20, rank. E+ being just one player, Apophis was at a huge disadvantage. He couldn't rely on having teammates to help distract the monsters, nor to heal him. However, his situation was far from hopeless. First off, Apophis had incredible firepower at his disposal. The proto-spiders didn't have stats as high as their levels would suggest, and while they could easily kill Apophis in moments if they attacked him in melee, their defenses and HP were quite poor. In addition, proto-spiders were deathly afraid of fire because it blinded their night vision and seared their eyes in an agonizing way that natural bioluminescence didn't. And unlike tiny, normal spiders, they couldn't swim well unless completely unhindered, and they drowned easily if attacked while in the water. Though they fed heavily on creatures who lived in freshwater, proto-spiders used their webs like fishing nets to drag their prey onto land, rather than attacking their prey in the water. A pack of proto-spiders was supposed to be a threat for a large group of LVL3 or LVL4 players. As a single LVL5 player, Apophis probably would have no chance of survival, if it weren't for his Chaos Flame ability granting him double damage and his many years of experience at energy management. After putting together a plan of attack for several minutes, Apophis performed the first step. He drew a simple knife and slashed his forearm, making sure to draw as much blood as possible. BVEC the proto-spiders on the other side of the lake, smelling the blood, rushed towards him. Only the queen stayed back, guarding her nest. Apophis threw flames in a wide arc, spreading it over and around both sides of the lake. He used only a little energy, maximizing the light emitted by the flames, rather than their heat. After all, it was the light that the spiders were terrified of. It worked. Panicking, the proto-spiders fled from the bright, chaos-infused flames and leaped into the lake to escape it. They could swim quickly, so long as they weren't wrestling with prey. Apophis threw a wave of low-heat flames over the water itself, forcing the monsters to dive underneath to escape it. Apophis did not relent, continuously throwing low-heat fire everywhere. One by one, the proto-spiders stopped scurrying along the shore towards Apophis and dove into the lake. Soon, the whole shore was completely consumed by bright flames. And Apophis had hardly used any energy, since he was creating flames which would deal almost no damage to any creature they touched. Eventually, the proto-spiders became desperate. They tried to stay underwater to escape the flames that their animalistic brains believed would slaughter them, but eventually they lost a lot of HP from drowning. Their survival instincts forced the proto-spiders to burst out from the water and run through the flames to escape drowning, but they were too terrified to do anything more than stagger blindly around until a few realized exactly where the flames were coming from. Now that his enemies were severely weakened and blinded, Apophis changed his tactics. He channeled a concentrated jet of super-hot flame and swept it like a fire hose across the spiders, causing them to burn in agony. The water soaking their bodies turned to deadly steam in moments, cooking them in their exoskeletons like lobsters. This attack lasted a very short time, but it was enough to finish off the last of the normal proto-spiders. Though the low-heat flames had taken hardly any energy, Apophis had channeled them for nearly half an hour, and it had added up. He ran out of energy almost at the moment the last normal proto-spider died. Each kill earned him the same notification. System. Era's proto-spider, killed. Gain 1235 EXP. This wasn't as much EXP as might have been expected, but that was the result of the normal proto-spiders being the minions of a boss. Once the last of the normal proto-spiders died, Apophis received a much more exciting notification. System. Level 6 achieved. Gain 5 skill points for the talent tree. However, the proto-spider queen herself was still alive, having refused to leave her nest. She was far more resistant to the blinding effects of the fire than her offspring, and had simply watched as they all died to Apophis's flames. But now her only thoughts were for the survival of her eggs. Resigned, the proto-spider queen spun a net of webbing around her eggs, picked it up with her mouthparts, and fled further into the recesses of the cavernous tunnel. There had been a few side tunnels that Apophis had found on his hike down to the lake, and he assumed there would be more of them further on. Hopefully for Apophis, the proto-spider queen would hide in one of these, rather than turning around and trying to fight him later on. Thankfully, she didn't seem to know that he was out of energy, though he would regenerate a tiny amount of it every minute. Apophis took advantage of this regeneration to sit down beside the water and rest with a good snack and some water that he'd bought in Omaya. He was exhausted from that fight, but fortunately, his level up had allowed him to regain some strength. Then Apophis resumed his journey, descending further and further until he must have been at least a kilometer below sea level. He didn't meet the proto-spider queen again, though he was prepared at every moment to hurl a tiny fireball into her face. After another 30 minutes of walking, Apophis came across an enormous iron door several meters high. Closed, of course. Next to it was a control panel. He entered the code that he'd obtained from the Zetark book. And smiled as the door of the bunker opened. Chapter 16, 1, Command Center. You are listening at novelfull.audio. * Congratulations. You have discovered a hidden location. * level 7 achieved. Gain 5 skill points for the talent tree. Wow, he said. That's a generous reward just for discovering a hidden place. He looked at the location name that appeared in his menu. Outer Rim Forward Military Command Center. Interesting. So this wasn't just a bunker, but a command center for Zetark forces. The Gothic architecture, the technology, everything was there like frozen in time. Apophis searched the place, but found little of interest. Most of the rooms were just offices. But when he arrived at the top floor, Apophis found a door inscribed with the Zetark word for archive. He instinctively knew that this was the gold mine. He entered the archive and found it to be a room filled with all kinds of documents. And other interesting things. Star map, summary. A diagram labeling all the Zetark outposts in the galaxy. Zetark Corvette construction diagram, epic, summary. Detailed schematics for crafting a Zetark corvette. He also found 11 more books containing Zetark combat techniques, 3 of which were for the Esper class. Skill Book, Esper, Rare, Name. Lord of Flames Ednel.co Skill Summary. Grants uncanny command of all nearby flames. You can control any flame within a 300-meter radius. This skill can be upgraded for 5 talent points. Skill Book, Esper, Epic, Name. Cosmic Mediation Skill Summary. Center yourself, open your mind, and meditate to become one with the universe. Permanently increases your maximum energy by 10%. Cooldown. 7 days. This skill can be upgraded for 10 talent points. Skill Book, Esper, Legendary, Name. Susanoo Summary. Summon a skeletal guardian spirit formed from your very soul. Grants you a titanic set of armor and armaments made of pure energy. Constantly drains energy while active. Asterisk this skill can be upgraded for 100 talent points. Asterisk Apophis couldn't believe it. He could sell any of these skill books for several million CG each on the galactic market. After learning the 3 Esper skills, Apophis tucked the other 8 skill books into his inventory. Once the galactic market was unlocked, he would sell or trade them away. It was time to find the command center's armory now. Chapter 17, 2, Command Center. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The armory happened to be very close to the archive room. Apophis entered, and unfortunately found it nearly empty. However, he found one interesting thing. Complete Zetark Battle Armor, Rare, Item Summary. Armor worn by Zetark soldiers for boots. On the ground warfare. Plus 10% to all primary stats. Plus 40% damage absorption. Certainly a good replacement for his current armor. It was time for Apophis to disconnect and rest in the real world. Before doing so, he used his new cosmic meditation skill to increase his maximum energy by 10%, then opened his character menu to check his status. Name. Apophis, Guild. /Race. Evolved Human, Evolution LVL. 1. Gender. Male class. Esper, 10 skill points available, LVL. 7 rank. E. Alignment. 0, neutral, stats. STR, strength. 170, plus 10%. INT, intelligence. 170, plus 10%. AG, agility. 170, plus 10%. DX, dexterity. 170, plus 10%. Energy. 800 luck. 1. Global skill. Skills. Chaos Flame, Cosmic Meditation, Master of Flames, Susanoo Learning Tree. Firebending. 5 PTS, Passive Skill. Archaeologist, Inventory. Equipment. Civilian clothing, common, service pistol, common, complete Zetark battle armor, rare, money. 1023 galactic coins. He put 5 points into Fire Mastery, giving him access to Blue Flame, which was far hotter than his original Red Flame. This would, of course, also be enhanced by Chaos Flame. He put the last 5 points into Energy Regeneration, which did exactly what the name implied, increased his energy regeneration in battle. Then it was time to log off and rest. Alexander opened his eyes, exhausted. He'd been playing for almost 12 hours straight. He got ready for bed and tried to fall asleep quickly, hoping to get a few short hours of sleep, but knowing that it was imperative that he waste as little time as possible. His mission timer, after all, was still running. So Alexander set the alarm clock to wake him in 4 hours, then fell asleep. Chapter 18 Dungeon. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Alexander's alarm clock went off at 6 a.m. It was one of the hardest wake-up calls of his life. Yet, if he wanted a chance of succeeding in his quest, he had to get back in the game as soon as possible. He grabbed some food from the refrigerator, then returned to his room and put the VRI helmet on his head. System. Welcome to the galaxy of Horus. Server. Posted 2 hours and 12 minutes ago. Congratulations to the player, Akira, for being the 100th player to reach LVL5 on the continent of Aurora. A public dungeon has been unearthed at global position 180-7056 for 5608. Shit. Apophis growled. He'd slept too much, and other players were catching up to him. Now, his top priority should be clearing that dungeon. He left the command post, then returned to the surface and found his bike. Apophis looked at the map, realizing that he was 40 minutes away by motorcycle from the dungeon's location. He set off at once as fast as he could. The dungeon was located in a beautiful area full of greenery, which was a nice change from the scorching sands which made up most of the Gobi Desert. When Apophis arrived, he found that at least 1,000 other players had beaten him there. The whole area was overwhelmed with players, many of whom were present out of simple curiosity. After all, only the genius players, or those who had no life the game, had reached LVL5 and unlocked their class by this point. Dungeons were designed to be played by parties of 5 players, ideally, a composition of 3 DPS, 1 healer, and 1 tank. There were 5 levels of dungeon difficulty. Easy, normal, hard, nightmare, and Ironman. Apophis remembered that in his first life, most easy dungeons had a successful clear rate of about 80%. Normal dungeons were successfully cleared between 30% and 40% of the time, depending on the individual dungeon. Hard dungeons varied quite a lot in clear rate, because they employed encounters and puzzles which required very specific strengths and knowledge to complete. Depending on the dungeon, hard mode had only a 1% to 10% clear rate. Then there was Nightmare, a difficulty so intense that only between 0.1% and 1% of attempts ever succeeded. Just like hard, the Nightmare difficulty posed such intense challenges that even Nightmare dungeons with a 1% clear rate were seen as pretty easy compared to most 0.1% clear rate Nightmare dungeons. Last of all, hardly anyone ever attempted dungeons on Ironman mode. Why would they? In an Ironman dungeon, dying meant permanently losing your character. Even professional players stuck to Nightmare difficulty, unwilling to play in a mode where they couldn't resurrect afterward. In Apophis's former life, he recalled only one team of players who'd ever beaten an Ironman dungeon. They'd been led by one of the 7 gods, Lucifer, a esper who'd mastered unarmed combat to a further extent than any other player. As everyone had found out once his team succeeded, the rewards for beating an Ironman dungeon were insanely good. They rewarded epic and legendary rarity items, and had even proved to be the only source of artifacts, the most powerful items in the entire game. After beating the Ironman dungeon which gave him so much fame, Lucifer was renowned as the only player in the entirety of Horus who possessed an artifact, called the Creator's Armor. The fact that Apophis knew so many intricate details about Horus's dungeon mechanics meant that he would have a huge advantage over most other teams to attempt them. His very next step would be to find a team capable of beating this first dungeon's Nightmare mode. As in every MMORPG, 90% of players had specced into DPS. Almost all who remained were healers, and only a handful were tanks. Finding a good team would be tricky. Chapter 19 Fanboy, you are listening at novelfull.audio. As Apophis walked around, searching for 4 partners to invite to his Nightmare dungeon party, he noticed a PvP duel about to begin. Both players were LVL5. One was a huntress named White, and the other was a male warrior named Scarlet. The event seemed to have drawn many spectators, most of whom were obviously cheering for White, a beautiful woman in her 20s with blonde hair and blue eyes. Notification. The duel between White and Scarlet will start soon. Notification. 5. Notification. 4. Notification. 3. Notification. 2. Notification. 1. Notification. The duel between White and Scarlet begins. The huntress immediately summoned a white wolf and drew her heavy gun. The white wolf threw herself upon Scarlet, who was running at full speed towards White. Scarlet stopped to defend himself against the wolf, allowing White to finish setting up her attack. The huntress aimed and fired one precision shot after another. With each successful hit, Scarlet lost about 20% of his health bar. In mere moments, Scarlet reached 1% minimum health, which triggered the end of the duel. Notification. Congratulations to the player, White, for defeating the player, Scarlet. Everyone shouted in excitement. The two duelists had bet 100 CG on the outcome of the fight, so Scarlet handed over the money. Congratulations, big sister, said Scarlet. Do you want to join my party? We're going to try the normal level dungeon. White didn't even answer. Scarlet hadn't even managed to inflict a single hit and yet claimed he was good enough to fight alongside her in a dungeon. But while everyone was discussing how well White had fought, a notification appeared. Server. Congratulations to the party led by the player, Caesar, for being the first to clear the dungeon, Gravedigger Tower. A reward of 1 level and 5 skill points has been awarded to each member of the party. Caesar was there. Apophis was a huge fan of this player. It was largely because of Caesar's popularity in the media that he had started playing Horus in the first place. He approached the huge portal of the dungeon, a structure 3 meters high. Rather than being part of the normal world, dungeons were instanced. Once they entered, players couldn't leave until either they beat the dungeon or the whole party wiped. As Apophis watched, Caesar appeared through the portal, accompanied by members of the super guild Renovatio Imperii. While the 5 party members were recovering from their excitement at having triggered this huge global achievement, while being applauded by the surrounding players, Apophis threw a stone at Caesar. It didn't do any damage, but immediately drew attention. The 4 other party members drew their weapons, ready to engage in some PvP against this insolent person, when Caesar spoke up. "Who are you?" he asked, "and what do you want?" Apophis replied. "I want to beat the nightmare mode. And you will help me." Caesar. "Nightmare mode? Me help you? Who do you think you are?" Apophis made a light smile and said. "Maybe you are afraid, maybe Caesar the Italian star player, has just a good marketing department but no balls." Caesar pulled out his huge hammers ready to engage in a PvP fight, when suddenly he received a duel request. Apophis smiled, "I currently have 3 skill books for your class, as well as 1023 CG. Apophis put this item in exchange to prove that he had them and then said. "If you beat me in a duel, I'll give them all to you. But if I win, you'll join my party and obey my orders as we beat it on nightmare difficulty." Caesar was skeptical. He was no fool and clearly understood that Apophis thought he had some secret weapon that he thought would grant him victory. Nevertheless, Caesar had just passed LVL 6. He was a professional who, he thought, understood Horus better than any other player. He'd not only played for 3 days straight, but had even completed several unique quests. Caesar didn't care about the items offered by Apophis. After all, he already had access to the huge resources of his super guild. What he wanted was a fight to get back at that arrogant bastard, and a duel was perfect, because if he won, the thousands of players in the area would get a notification that he had that player, which would still be more prestigious than a wild PvP fight. Notification. The duel between Apophis and Caesar will start soon. Notification. 5. Notification. 4. Notification. 3. Notification. 2. Notification. 1. Notification. The duel between Apophis and Caesar begins. Fight. Chapter 20, The Duel of the Titans. You are listening at novelfull.audio. By this point, many of the players who were present recognized Apophis's name, and of course Caesar was already a celebrity. So it was unsurprising that the altercation between Apophis and Caesar immediately drew a crowd of onlookers. Some even postponed their own dungeon attempts to watch the duel. Even White, the huntress from the earlier duel, looked on with uncharacteristic intensity as the timer counted down. Caesar drew his 100-pound warhammer and waved it around like a piece of light wood while Apophis got into position 100 meters away. Then the timer hit 0. Apophis launched a dozen balls of fire. Caesar immediately realized the danger of the purple fireballs and used his skill, light push. This allowed him to ready his hammer and lunge forward at the speed of sound. A deafening sonic boom filled the air and Caesar covered the 100-meter gap in less than 2 seconds. Apophis had almost no time to defend himself. He took the hammer blow right in the face, a cataclysmic strike which propelled him over 300 meters backwards. This was a critical blow, dealing 85% of his HP at once. This attack also inflicted Apophis with the stoned debuff, slowing all his movements by 90% for the duration. That wasn't good. Yet, thanks to his Lord of Flames technique, the fireballs which Caesar had initially dodged now chased him around the battlefield. They slammed into him only a few seconds after his successful hit on Apophis. Caesar burst into flames, receiving a damage over time effect that dealt 6% of his maximum HP in fire damage every 3 seconds. Caesar ran with all his might, his hammer towards the still paralyzed Apophis. Caesar entered melee range in about 7 seconds, then activated his skill Unstoppable, preparing to deal the final blow. A huge spirit skeleton blocked his strike. For of course, Apophis had just used Susanoo. Caesar retreated several paces, but it was too late. The spirit skeleton threw a lightning-fast, powerful punch at Caesar, which took out 50% of his HP. Desperate, Caesar used light push again. His hammer slammed with full force against the skeleton, creating a shock wave that bent the few trees nearby. But it was all useless. Chaos Flame burned away the last of his HP. Caesar had lost. Notification. Congratulations to the player, Apophis, for defeating the player, Caesar. A long silence fell over everyone watching. Then, some began to mumble among themselves. Are these guys really at the same stage of the game as us? People wondered. That was so much more powerful than the stuff we can do right now. But then, all at once, everyone applauded and began chanting, Apophis. 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 Several players had recorded this fight, and the videos were quickly watched all around the world. Some commentators called the event a Duel of the Titans, a term which in the MMORPG community meant the confrontation between two of the top players in an MMO. The claim that Apophis and Caesar qualified for this went completely uncontested, and soon everyone was casually referring to their duel as such. On the forums, everyone had already been hyped beyond belief about the spawning of the Gravedigger Tower dungeon, but conversations about the duel quickly sent the forums into a complete frenzy. In the moments after his victory, Apophis rushed to Caesar's side and held out his hand to Caesar, who was still lying on the ground. GG, said Apophis. Good duel, O.org. Caesar still couldn't believe what had just happened. He'd lost very few 1v1 fights in his life. Nonetheless, Caesar grabbed Apophis's hand. Good duel, he said, but I hope you'll give me the opportunity of a rematch later. Now it was finally time to challenge the dungeon itself. Yet, Apophis decided that, while he was happy to have a skilled player like Caesar along, someone who could be trusted to keep to his word and fight effectively as a team, Apophis wasn't sure about the Renovatio Imperii members who had already gone with Caesar through the dungeon. They might be bitter at Apophis for beating Caesar, and even the slightest challenge to his authority would be disastrous. On Nightmare difficulty, a single mistake would be heavily punished. So Apophis put out a call for 1 Esper healer, 1 boxer tank, and 1 DPS warrior. However, he already had a player in mind. Apophis sent a PM to the huntress named, who was impressed enough by the duel that she accepted. Then Apophis adjusted his looking for group message, announcing that was still looking for an Esper healer and a boxer tank. He received about 20 proposals, including 2 people who he recognized from his former life. Knowing he could rely on these people, Apophis accepted their requests and invited them into his party. The boxer, Hulk, had excelled in PvP arena fights in Apophis's previous life. He took the unorthodox character-building route of focusing on his endurance, which won him many fights. Apophis knew less about the Esper healer, Chocolate, only recalling that she had been pretty active in his former super guild, the Fanatic War. Once the party was ready, Apophis queued up an instance of the dungeon on nightmare difficulty. The portal, originally green, became red. The onlookers stared on in awe, wondering if even this party could succeed. No one else would even think about trying it on nightmare difficulty. Then Apophis led his party into the dungeon.